I just won bronze place in this month's Portal Tuners BMAX class mini four-wheel drive races. It goes without saying that against exceptional competition, I prevailed, and I won bronze place in this month's BMAX class races. Yes, pretty cool, with my car Hellboy. Yay, it was bound to win. Finally it did. Yes, cool. This car is definitely fast enough. I just had to make some adjustments here and there to make it super fast, and yeah, then this was competitive against every other car out there, and that was pretty darn cool. So yeah, I entered 2 cars for BMAX class. I had missed the tune class, unfortunately, because I arrived late. I arrived at about 2:30. The races started at about 12:45 or so, and yeah, so it was like tune class was well underway when I got there, so I wasn't able to enter a tune class car. But I waited around for BMAX class, and I entered 2 cars in this, and yeah, I entered Hellboy, my FMA car, and one of my newest cars. This is the SXX Hellfire, yay! And Hellfire has an SSX chassis, polycarbonate reinforced chassis, pretty darn cool. So it's got a wider wheelbase than typical mini four-wheel drive cars. I've got the usual low fricks tires, carbon wheels on the front, and super hards in the rear. I've got, in this BMAX car, I've got Hyperdash motor in here. Pretty darn cool. And yeah, weights galore on the front, sides, and rear. And this one has 13 millimeter rollers, aspirated rollers in the front, along with 11 millimeter bearing rollers on the top. And on the bottom, I've got 4 aspirated 19 millimeter rollers, these ringless rollers right here. Pretty darn cool, and they spin freely. Do you remember I built this car and I showed you how to do it? And I chose this side stay setup. Yes, here are the side stays that I used for this car with the side weights. Yes, pretty darn cool. So remember, I had a choice of either ones that stuck out like this or ones that were like this, which were not as close to the wheel, but they were closer together inward so that it wouldn't stick out so much. So the other one stuck out a little bit, such that they were like almost in line with the rollers themselves, but not quite. And I just didn't feel confident in that setup too much. So this one I felt a little more confident with, and so I set it up with this. And it paid off, actually, because this was a pretty darn fast car. This was very competitive as well. Unfortunately, it coursed out at an inopportune time, and also, yeah, it was a little slow against other cars out there, but that's okay, because this is like a first attempt. I'm going to just refine this and see if we can make this faster. Pretty darn cool. Hellboy, however, was not to be denied. With its 12, 13 millimeter rollers in the front, yes, with these stabilizers on the head stabilizers on the top and 13 millimeter aspirated ringless rollers on the back. Yeah, this was not to be denied. Very, very cool. And yeah, I'm going to be selling a version of this called the FMA Advanced Pack by Venom Tuners. Yes, Venom Tuners is my group. We're part of McBite Racing. Yeah, pretty cool. So get your kit today. Yes, pretty darn cool. So I also entered Open Class. Open Class, I didn't fare as well in, but I did get my cars into the final 2. So 2 of my 3 cars landed in the finals. Here in BMAX, both of my cars landed in the finals. So here, this was my experimental car. Everybody must remember this, right? This is Wolfie. Yeah, this is the car that Tony Papagna said was a really fast car. And so I had revived it because the chassis broke. And so this is like Wolfie Part 2, because it's got a new chassis. I had to basically gut the whole thing and take it all out of the old chassis and put everything into this new chassis. And I found that the characteristics of the 2 chassis were a little different, probably because I decided not to cut as much stuff on the sides this time, so it's not as flexy as the old Wolfie. But you know what? There are other features about this that the old Wolfie did not have. So this is a little bit sturdier than the old Wolfie because I didn't cut all this stuff off on the sides. So yeah, I changed the weighting on the rear so that we've only got this rear weight like this. It's a single rear weight, but it's enough to keep the car down. So this is a very light car. This is, I believe it's about 108 grams, maybe even less than that. So it's very, very light. Yeah, I'm very proud of this because like all of my technologies that I've developed so far for lightness in cars has been placed in this car, and you see it's got a hard body shell and it's so light. So that's amazing, I think. Usually to get this form of lightness, you need a polycarbonate body, but I did it with a hard shell body. An animal racer, no doubt. It's even got the animal in there and is 108 grams or less. So yeah, the old Wolfie was a little less than 108 grams. So that was pretty cool, pretty challenging. I did it with, right here, a car catcher material body damper. Yeah, pretty darn cool. So yeah, I'm especially proud of this one, even though it didn't land into the finals. Still, it was competitive. And yeah, it won a race, and then the other two just coursed out, but that's okay. That's the way the ball bounces, and I'm happy that this actually won a race. So the other two cars I have here, ooh, my pro car. Very, very cool. Yes, this is an MS suspension chassis. It's got a Mach Dash motor in there. So of course it's fast, right? Yeah, and yeah, it's got all of these great technologies in it. And a lot of these technologies I studied and I placed in my own car. And my own car basically is very similar, but I changed some of the philosophies in it, such that I included right here, all of you know about this, the car catcher rear pivot. Yeah, it worked out really well. And you know why? It's because I developed this car for 3-lane tracks. So this is probably why it didn't work very well in a 5-lane setting, because with all the hard rocking of the 5-lane track, the wooden track, it's very harsh on cars, these wooden tracks. So this thing here wasn't going to fare that well on a wooden track. But on this 3-lane plastic track, it fared really well. Why? Because I tested all of these technologies at home on a 3-lane track, and it worked out great. So yeah, whatever I did at home translated to this racing environment here at Portal Tuners this month. Pretty darn cool. And so yeah, my main thing was about getting this a little bit straighter, and then also keeping these two weights, these two shafts right here, wheel shafts, in place. So it's a little heavier in the rear tail damper here, but also here's the horrible thing. So in its very first race, it did really well, and then it coursed out at the very end, and it turns out that my whole front plate, this AT bumper here, kind of cracked off. So this was glued on in the front, and then it just cracked off, and I was wondering why it was so loose. It's because it was completely off the hinge that was glued onto the base. And so I was scrambling. I was oh no, I've got to salvage this car somehow. And so luckily, fellow racer Maynard was able to get me some glue so that I could glue this back in place. And yeah, it took a little bit of effort, but I was able to get it glued back, and I was able to race it another 2 times, and I was able to get this into the finals. Pretty darn cool. Yeah, very, very cool. This car was very stable, whereas other cars were very fast and they coursed out. This one still stayed on the track, and it was plenty fast, and yeah, it got into the finals. Pretty darn cool. So I'm very proud of this because I just wanted to win some races with this, and I was able to get it to be super fast by adding a Mach Dash motor in here. Yeah, so a lot of you probably know that, well, I attempted to race in the Outcast races a couple of months ago, and I had a Hyper Dash motor in here, but that racetrack was not conducive to this doing well. So I had to dumb it down to a, what was it? Not a Sprint Dash, but the Light Dash motor, the Yellow Bell one. And it was faring really well. It was staying on the track, but it was too darn slow. So on this particular track, the speed track right here, I was able to use a Mach Dash motor, and it fared really well on it, and I had the proper brake settings, and yeah, pretty cool. And I consulted with Shell Shock prior to the races, and I said to him, so it seems like this has got some weird technical stuff going on. And he said, oh, no, it looks harder than it actually is. And I was thinking about this. I was yeah, this looks a lot like a bigger version of the tracks that I had prepared for the Liberty Cup. Now, all of you know that I held these Liberty Cup races in my home for 2 years, and a lot of very, very awesome racers came to my place to race against me, and we had a great time doing these little races. Sometimes there were just a few people, sometimes there were as many as 12 people, 12 racers in the races, and that was pretty darn cool. So yeah, getting your experience down pat on a 3-lane track, that you can apply that skill to other 3-lane tracks. Pretty darn cool. So yeah, with all of that experience in mind, I was yeah, well, I've seen this kind of a track before, and I actually can do well on this type of track. So long as I get my brake settings right, I can do well on this track. And that's, with that newfound confidence, I was able to basically start this car right here without any dampers at all, And this thing more or less stayed on the track until the very end and then finally coursed out. And so then, without the dampers, I started adding dampers onto it, little by little, until I got to a point where this was a very fast and formidable and stable car. And that's the car that I raced. This car right here that I'm holding in my hand with the damper settings, this is what I raced. And yeah, pretty darn cool. So yeah, it is wicked fast, hyperdash motor, and yeah, even for a hyperdash motor car, this is wicked fast. So this was going against a Mach dash car in the finals. Yeah, so here's the funny thing. The very first race I raced this, something happened with another car and it flipped around and then it hit my car, and then it was going in opposite directions, but I was like stronger, so it was pushing, and then suddenly, when I retrieved my car, I smelled this burnt electrical smell, and I was like, oh God, the motor is toast. And yeah, the motor was temporarily toast. I had to remove the motor and then set it aside to cool off, and then I put in a substitute motor in there, which was not as fast as the original motor. But I was able to coax a faster speed out of it by using a higher electrical charge. So instead of my usual 150 volt batteries, I charged it up to 152. So yeah, unfortunately, on the final race, this was a touch over 152, and so I immediately coursed out in this. And I really should have just kept it at like 152 or slightly below, and I probably would have fared better than third place. So this is what happens when you go against super good racers and you want to win. Yeah, so I talked to Maynard about this, and I said, yeah, I could have done better if I just wasn't so greedy with the juice. And he said, no. The problem with that thinking is, like, if you didn't win with the lower juice, then you would have kept on thinking to yourself, oh, coulda, woulda, you know, like I would have been like thinking twice about it, and I would have probably have wanted to put the higher juice in there. So it was just fate, I think, that my car coursed out at the time it did. It just happens. Sometimes it's just bad luck. That's usually what it is. I mean, this car had to go through several trials to get to the finals. It wasn't like they were just like 10 cars or something like that. There was a lot of cars racing against each other. And yeah, we all basically raced against one another. We got to the end. Well, 3 people got to the end. I was one of them. And so this was definitely a super fast car. Unfortunately, on that very last race, I was going against Shell Shock and what was the other gentleman's name? I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'll get your name soon. But yeah, I was going against the two of them. And I immediately thought to myself, you know what? What's the third place prize? And then Shell Shock said, no, don't think like that. You gotta think first or second. And I'm like, no, I just want to know what the third place prize is, because I'll probably be third place. And so, yeah, I ended up being third place. And that's what this whole trophy is about. And that's cool, because third place in this race gets you a kit. Yes. So first, second, or third, you all get a kit. And that's pretty darn cool. So I have here the Japan Cup 2024 Ignition. Pretty darn cool. I have many of these, but I've yet to build one yet. So maybe I'll build one and see how well it goes. So someone said, oh yeah, it's MA chassis. It's going to be very fast on 3-lane tracks. I'm like, yes, it will be. It's just that it's not a polycarbonate body. So BMAX class, that's secure. I finally won a BMAX race. Yay. That was my first BMAX race too. I've never entered a BMAX race before. So pretty cool. So yeah, those were the two race classes I entered, and yeah, I had a lot of fun at Arena STEM this month. Arena STEM is where they have the Portal Tuners races as well as the Outcast races. Pretty darn cool. They happen every single month, yes, and I think the third Saturday is the Outcast race, and usually the fourth Saturday is the Portal Tuners race, yes, and I think that's going to be a recurring thing, and yeah, pretty darn cool. And let's see, some of the awesome folks I met this month. JP provided me with, yes, this. And I'm going to be reviewing it soon. This is pretty darn cool. This is an open class car, and all I have to do is add some things to it and make it super cool. Yeah, so you'll be hearing about this pretty darn soon. And yeah, it is so lightweight. It's so awesomely stable too. Very cool. Right out of the box without any rollers. Boom, without any dampers, that is. It just lands flat. Pretty cool. Now, I had experimented with other cars while I was there just to see what they would be like. And yeah, I put my Pro Stock car on the track too. and it stayed on the track here. And the motor that I had in its place was, ooh, a Black Bell Hyperdash, and it stayed on the track and is wicked fast. Yeah, not as fast as the metal roller cars, but it's pretty darn fast nonetheless. Yes, very, very cool. So everybody, if you like this video, please slam the like button, subscribe to my channel. You'll see more videos just like this one. Until next time, everybody, see you. Bye.